Hello, everybody. Welcome again to the day for DPL. And this time it's me trying to talk to you about some of my research and some of what I discovered while thinking about what is well-being in the teaching and learning environment. My idea, if for you is okay, is to try to go through a presentation that are prepared, where you will be able to work on some of the most recent literature around this particular topic, and hopefully we will be able to nail down some of the concepts around this, some of the ideas that are already floating within this field. I'm sure loads of you have already thought about these issues. Loads of you have ideas on how to tackle some of the main issues we will be talking about. I invite you to really share them, keep sharing them on Padlet and Discourse. For this presentation, I invite you to have some paper or an e-notebook or anywhere on which you can scribble upon. We will have 3 tasks during this presentation, so you are very welcome to pause for allowing the time, for taking the time to really think about the task I'm giving you. If we were in person, I would normally allow at least 5-6 minutes. I would invite you to chat with your friends or on a close table. So perhaps you want to create something similar with some of your colleagues on this course. You might want to initiate a conversation, or you might prefer to just stick to your piece of paper and take the time to do that. So let's dive in. This is very much connected to what you have read up to now. We will go through some of the idea that we've already seen, but we'll try to capitalize on them and try to push to a level further for making sure that you will have the space to really think about your learning space, your teaching and learning space, your ideas, your practices, and also your fears, your doubts, and your misunderstandings. So I'm going to share the screen with you, and we take it from there. Okay, I'm utilizing Microsoft Teams for this, so you know. So there we go. Hang on a minute. I hope I'm doing it okay. Yeah, sorry for this. You see, this is the first time I do this, so I hope it's right. So let's go. You know who I am, so let's jump to the next slides already. So well-being in higher education. I've got some data around the United Kingdom, but the situation within the UK is incredibly similar to what we normally see in the Western type of society and Western type of academia, but it resonates very much with also is observed in many other parts of the world. And similar type of issues I've tracked down, you can find them in many other situations. And for example, there are several articles on Malaysian university, Chinese university, Japanese university, and so on and so forth, where very similar type of issues are really defined and described. Overall, we can say that in the United Kingdom and international, universities are facing the crisis of students' well-being. You have references running below every slide, and at the back of the presentation, you will find loads of references. So if you are keen to discover and to know more, you will have plenty of time. Student disclosing mental health illnesses has increased nearly 5 times since 2006. And an incredible percentage of students responds once asked that they have experienced incredible, very difficult type of mental health issues, and we can see very distressing data around suicidal thoughts as well. In general, the students' well-being, it's less than of the general population. This is true in the UK, but as I said, it's true more widely and continues to decline. So here are some of the questions that I often receive around this data. Is it because we are more free to talk about mental health and well-being? Is it for this reason that now we record a continuous increase of this type of issues, or is because really these are increasing? And my answer to it is usually, well, regardless of the reason, what we have is a students population that is struggling. So yes, it is possible that we are recording more cases because there is more freedom and people come forward more easily, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't consider them. And therefore, I invite people to just look at the data and look at what we have. And even if this data, some people declare, well, these are inflated because some of the question might be leading or whatever it is around this data that doesn't really taken from a scientific point of view, you might, find, some oppositions to some of these thoughts. What this tells me is that we have a struggling students population. And what I would add is that we have a struggling staff population too. So we should look at this data and we should be concerned of the fact that we have more and more and more students struggling on our campuses. We should look at this data and think and be aware of the fact that we are called to do something about this. We can't just acknowledge and put our mind at rest thinking that, oh, well, this is because everybody is unwell, so let's carry on like this. I think that this is a call for action, and this is how I take this data, which are distressing and which are really concerning. So what are the causes of these issues? Why well-being is deteriorating in this way? Academic workload, and we all know the pressure that our students are subject to. High level of expectancy of academic performances. So students expect for themselves to get the maximum grade possible. This is because the environment outside is very complex. We all know well that we are entering a very difficult phase. We have been in this phase for a long time of economic uncertainty, of change, of a much more volatile job environment, job market. So they really feel the pressure to succeed, and often the success is associated to a grade. This has been also ingrained in them since they were very young. You do well if you get the best mark. If you get the best mark, you get in the best possible university. If you don't do that, you will never get the job you wish. There is a narration of success that is really poisonous because it doesn't take in account that as human beings, we fail pretty much every day, all the time. There is a financial burden. The amount of money people have to put into education as students is terrifying, and the level of stress that this causes is well understood in literature. And obviously changes in lifestyle. If you think how the life changed when you enter university, this is pretty phenomenal. And this is true if you start your undergraduate studies or if you start your master's study or your PhD. Something changed remarkably. And for some students, it's associated to leaving home, leaving their own country, getting into a new culture, having to restart a circle of friends, having to look after themselves to a greater extent, having to preoccupy about finding a job that can sustain the fees we were talking before about. The changes in lifestyle are remarkable, and often they pass from colleges and secondary settings where people knew their name, they knew who they were interested in their development, to places, university, where they feel faceless. They have a big burden to carry and not very often are acknowledged. This is pressure from Office for Students I mentioned in our Zoom meeting. So pressure for UK government, but this again, as I said, is true across the world. I work quite closely with institutions in Australia, and their own institutions, their own governmental body are starting to pressure institutions to think how to effectively respond to this growing issue. And this is very true, as I said, across the board. It's something that we can see as a growing concern. And if you want, we can see some cynicism in that. They know damn well that if students are unwell, very likely they will not, they will leave university, they will leave the academy, and that equates to less money. So perhaps there is also a very cynical taking on it, but we can make the most of the cynical taking. We can make the most of this perhaps, cynical way of looking at it and thinking they're still pressuring for creating a solution. They're still pressuring university to make sure that the environments are more healthy. So we can try to make the most of this opportunity. I just want to highlight here what is important to consider well-being. As we discussed before, and I'm sure you kind of analyze even further in the previous reading, well-being is something that affects everybody. Everybody's in there. Every part of the students' population is affected by well-being, as we all have a mental health. We can work on the well-being of everybody. We can work to sustain the well-being of staff and students. We can work to improve it. And this affects everybody, regardless of any characteristics. So this reinforces the need for a huge and timely action within the sector. Moving from higher education to learning environments, why is important to think about well-being in learning environments? Why should we think about that? And this might echo again what Kate Lisser shared in a TED Talk. Well, learning environments are crucial setting within higher education. Are we kidding ourselves if we think that well-being should be left to the service, left to those kind of additional extracurriculum idea and activity? Well-being is part of the learning environment, is completely embedded in it, and learning environment impacts significantly of well-being. This is a crucial setting where we spend most of our time. Why should we leave well-being outside it? Why should we leave it to this extracurricular activity or the services and the counseling? Why? Why don't we start to think about the learning environment as a place of the whole human being, not only the academic self, but the whole human being, where well-being is part of the human being and how we feel and how we function. Again, a list of why this is important. Students' well-being is integral to learning. I study well if I'm well. I teach well if I'm well. There is no way around it. And I hope all the activity we've done before has helped you to really go back to your own experience of this. Poor students' well-being can impact academic achievement, and lack of resilience to protect well-being can limit the students' learning capacity and engagement, with consequences for continuation and attainment. All boils down to me, as I said at the beginning of this day, you learn well when you're well. You teach well when you're well. There is no way around it. If you're not well, you cannot achieve, you cannot function well, you cannot contribute in the same which you would otherwise, and it's absolutely integral to learning. And this is incredibly well understood in primary and secondary school settings. No clue why we seem to forget this in academia. I think it's because in academia, we only look at the academic self. We don't look at the full human being, and we miss out incredible opportunity for flourishing. To me, higher education is about the development of an all-integrated person, and is also about preparing students to deal with an unknown future, and preparing us to deal with an unknown future, where perhaps failure is part of it, perhaps not being able to succeed in the way in which we wish is part of. doesn't mean that we cannot be happy with who we are, or we cannot be able to make the most of the opportunity are given to us. Teaching and learning can be framed to me as a process of becoming and developing, help them to further develop the individual student agency they already have, and is absolutely necessary for a long-term well-being. We talked of student agency already. They already have this agency. We don't have to give it to them. But very often we have to help them to be confident of the fact they have agency. We live in an institution that stripped agency of students. It's a matter of supporting them in develop this agency, be aware of the fact they have it, and help them and support them in utilize them. And this sense of agency is absolutely crucial and necessary for long-term well-being. Research indicates that well-being is associated with deep learning, and teaching practices contribute to experiences of well-being. What does this mean? It means that every experience involved in the learning, so from classroom culture to physical learning spaces, to course design, to curriculum, to virtual learning spaces, to the material we offer to students, the way in which you teach, everything can have either a positive or a negative impact on health and well-being. All about the learning environment is not neutral. It's not neutral. It has an impact. It's positive or negative. There are no ways around it. And we, for this reason, I think is incredibly powerful and can be scary if we look at it in that way, but it is powerful. It is a powerful space in which we can move into and in which we can work with our students to make sure that we can really make the most of it. The challenges posed by transitioning into higher education settings need to be addressed. And not only by giving students information or resources, or, as we said, making sure that they can access, the possibility of doing some physical activities in gyms, or they have green spaces, is also ensuring that the classroom and the learning environment supports health and well-being. Within the classroom walls, regardless if they are virtual walls or physical walls, and as part of the curriculum. It's not enough leaving to the counseling. We have a role to play for ourselves and for our students, and our institution need to be aware of it. If we want to solve the big problem we were talking at the beginning, we have to look at learning environments. So how we can create conditions for well-being in learning environments? Again, going back to what Kate said, the learning environment can impact the level of stress that students feel, and I add staff feel, the degree to which they feel connected to others. And this, I think, is very easy to think. If the learning environment is not welcoming, if it's not set in a certain manner, we don't feel any connection to people around us, and we feel we don't belong. We feel we shouldn't be there. We feel that, if we're there or not there, it doesn't really change. That people close to me will never really realize I'm there. And that feeling is soul destroying, I think, or at least it's soul destroying for me. And also, the learning environment impact the extent to which students feel meaningfully engaged in the university experience. For some of our students who works, who have parental responsibility, care responsibility, health issues, the learning environment is the only space that they have for connecting at university. So there's really impact on the way in which they feel engaged with the whole university experience. And we have to be mindful for that. Not everybody can join society, not everybody can join the football team, not everybody has the time to hang around for coffee with friends. Sometimes that is the only opportunity for achieving a certain university experience. And this is also true for all those students that can access the football team, can do this and the other. So what should we foster? Opportunity for social interaction, sense of control over workload, going back, if you think about the causes, opportunity to make a valued contribution. I can be part of this classroom. What I say is important and relevant. I feel less faceless. I feel that even though we are 200 in this classroom, the fact that I'm here matters. Optimal level of challenge and teacher support. This idea that students want it easy drives me insane. They don't want it easy. They want it difficult, in fact. Very often, they want to be challenged. But challenge has to be something that can be managed properly with support, teacher support, and also we have to support students in look how to challenge themselves in a healthy way, in a healthy manner. Positive classroom culture and access to resources, incredibly important, in particular at this time of virtual learning environments, where not all of our students are blessed enough to be provided with a laptop as I do, or to have reliable internet connection, or having spaces at home where they feel safe to talk about their experiences and giving certain contribution. Some of them have different learning abilities and they need certain support for making sure that they can make the most of it. These psychosocial conditions combined together create a healthy or unhealthy setting that impact well-being. We don't live in neutral spaces. We live in spaces that support or hinder well-being. No way around it, and it's well understood. Plenty of references, plenty of research around it. If you have to convince your institution, just give them all the references at the back of my PowerPoint. Here just some reflection that I did on the condition for well-being in learning environments and my own institution. And I want to share them with you because this is something that it can be reproduced in your own institution. They carry very general kind of ideas. And it's also my own journey that I think has been proving very important for me to do with the students at work as an experiment of co-creation. We created this research together for understanding what are the conditions of well-being in learning environments in our institution, and it's something that has given them the power to act, to gain their agency very much. And this is something that can be reproduced at your institution. So I want to talk a little bit about the methodology, but the findings are very much general and generalizable. So we provide an opportunity for students and staff to conceptualize well-being issues and to produce recommendations and solutions. We had a blending of students from different years of studies and discipline, staff, both academic and non-academic roles. And we ran focus groups with about 120 members. We gave them the opportunity to think about what is well-being, what are the learning spaces, exactly what you've done at the beginning of today, and to think about the relationship. They've done exactly what you've done this morning or whenever you started to work on the day task. What you've done that is exactly what the students and staff have done as part of this research. And they've done it in groups so that they could contribute to each other to each other ideas as much as you have done using Padlet and Discourse. Out of that conversations, what we discovered is that all the participants in our focus group identify a relationship between teaching and learning environment. Every single one said that they could see the impact. And this came well before I gave them the prompt, learning environments are not neutral. They simply think about their experience, they arrive to that conclusion. Learning environments are not neutral when we think about well-being. They carry a weight, and there is a relationship. And you might have arrived at the same conclusion while doing exactly the same experiments, exactly the same activity at the beginning of the day. Often students identify well-being as a holistic concept, physical, mental, social, and in some cases spiritual, and as functioning well. Eudaimonic well-being as much as feeling well, hedonic well-being. So they identify well-being as an holistic concept. Everything is part of well-being. The physical self, the mental self, the social self, and also the spiritual self for students who nurture that side of themselves more, I would say, consciously. And then is both feeling well, I'm okay today, but also functioning well. I can do what I wish. I'm able to really work on the way in which I wish. And there are 4 key themes that emerge from the analysis that we did. That a student-centered environment has a positive impact on students' well-being. That a lack of intercultural and international integration has a negative impact on students' well-being. Emotional intelligence has a positive impact on students' well-being, and the recognition of a close intertwined relationship between staff well-being and students' well-being. So I will go through each one of this kind of themes, and you will be able to explore them on your own as well. So first of all, staff and students identified that when the learning environment is centered on the students, this is sustained positive well-being. And I identified some characteristic of how this environment should be. It should be personalized, it should be flexible, open, active, and engaging. Students feel more valued, engaged, and noticed. And if the student's environment is in this way. And it's very important for them to feel in this way for functioning well, and highlights the necessity for students to be looked at as a whole person in the teaching and learning environment. So not only their academic side, but the fact they are a whole person. They need to be acknowledged. They need to be considered for all they are, with their backgrounds, their insecurity, their fears, their hopes, their mottos, their assumptions, everything. Where the students central learning environment occur, students said they alleviate the stresses that we discussed at the beginning. So the academic workload, the feeling of overwhelmed negative cluster environment, and enables greater engagement, which we saw that was absolutely fundamental for generating positive learning environment. So there is absolutely this need to consider how we can create this environment in small group teaching, large group teaching, virtual learning environment, different student spaces. So personalization. Here are some examples of good practices. Learning students' names. Obviously, if you have a classroom of 300, this might be very difficult. What is the equivalent for that? And it is a question for you. If you're in a virtual space, what is the equivalent of learning students' names when you are in a small group teaching of 30? Check in on students before, during, after class to assess learning. And this really helps and support them to keep in track of what they're doing and alleviate this feeling of overwhelming. Showing an interest in students' life and learning, and seeking feedback from students throughout the module. These are just some of the examples I just want to give you so it remains less abstract. Flexibility. A negative example really comes in relation to assessment. The stress experience when assessment is rigidly concentrated a few points during the academic year, where there is no way in which students can feel a sense of ownership on the assessment. It can become incredibly overwhelming. The idea that there is these daunting things that you have to do and you have no control over them, no in terms of criteria, no in terms of deadlines, no in terms of nothing. They're just there, and they are, and this causes an incredible stress. A positive example is in relation to the online learning and resources, the different ways of times of learning, the different that can really accommodate much more the lives of students and ourselves. Again, some example of good practices, considering the time of exam and assignments to alleviate undue stress. And this is the work that we have to do at institutional level. We have to make institutions aware that we need to rethink the way and the timing of assessment. We need to work with students for understanding how we can alleviate this stress. This is something we have to do together. And I think our agency and the students' agency is to keep pushing on this, keep thinking, how can we do this? How can we consider the time in a different manner? Offering students a higher degree of choice in designing assessments. And we talked already about the student-devised assessment. I will talk more in the following day. How can we give to students this feeling of ownership of their own assessment so they can have a control on it? And taking away these feelings of powerless feelings and of looking at something big and ugly and not being able to do anything about it. Opportunity to set their own deadlines or percentage of final grade for assignments. Provide frequent formal informal feedback that helps students progress to the next stage of larger projects. So this is within flexibility, because when you provide feedback, students can change and can evolve their own ways of looking at a topic. And this can be done also via peer type of support. Offering students the option to choose their best 2 out of 3 for assignments, providing students with notes and PowerPoint slides ahead, provides lecture recordings, making sure that all the accessibility is there so they can work at their own time. Openness, activeness, and engagement, facilitating interaction, create a sense of community, a social network, and positive classroom culture. Resilience is an outcome. We can lean on each other. It's absolutely crucial and important to create a community. And I want to highlight here that it has to be a balance with not forcing engagement. Putting students on a spotlight might be a way for kind of pushing them, but it can be very daunting. So this has to be fostered and not enforced. Example of good practice. Use of social connectedness, startup activity, who are you, where you're from, the Padlet map that we did, the idea of creating space on discourse in which they can introduce themselves, fostering peer group learning, making sure that you create constantly opportunities for social connection and teamwork. Any type of active learning is very welcome. Suggesting opportunity for students to interact outside of class time. I often suggest, if I know there is an exhibition that is linked to the module content, I suggest them that there is opportunity to do that. I usually ask some students to look at opportunities for doing things that can enforce the learning and to invite others. Offering mini break in class and encourage students to take this time to get to know each other. Really make sure that the material is connected to the real life issues and work skills and so on. Civic engagement, it's incredibly important. A lot of students, it is well understood that if you feel that what you're studying, what you're doing is relevant and important, this will really truly help and truly create this feeling of worthiness that we were talking before. So perhaps assignments that the results of which can be utilized by a community group or a campus initiative, and this create connectedness also with what is out there. Our campus are in cities. Very often we don't think about the issues that are in those cities, while we have such a brain power on our campus, and so many of the assignments that we give to students can be thought so that can be utilized from this community that are outside the campus. And this gives a huge sense of achievement and purpose. So it's the idea of developing these leaders of tomorrow, and I don't really like this way of talking, but it's been suggested to me by a couple of students, so I decided to put it in there. But to me, it's encouraging students to explore their own values and goals, and this can be done in the assessment. There we go. Big talking up to now. Time to you. What are the ways in which you create a positive impact? What are the ways in which you create a student-centered environment? Think about what you do in the classroom and list them there. Look them up. Think about what you do. Jot it down. Share with others if you wish. Otherwise, save it for later. Really, what do you do? What can you add to these good examples? What is your example of student-centered environment? And how do you do that in small teaching, large teaching, virtual, physical? I'll leave you a little bit of time so you can write it down. So you can pause now and you can come back once you're finished. Welcome back. So negative impact of a lack of intercultural international integration. Very often in our classroom, there are groups of people that gravitate toward each other. In our campus is very well understood how the Chinese community really stick to themselves, and it's very difficult integration. And this causes incredibly moments of isolation and discomfort for that particular community and for the general classroom, where also other people feel completely isolated. If you read my report, you'll see some very painful accounts of students describing this. The stigma is very much reinforced, and these moments of isolation and discomfort are significant. These impact learning. I feel I don't belong, or I only belong with those people. And obviously this impacts learning at big extent. So the lack of integration ferments complex issue of cultural misunderstanding and stigma, which are barriers to making friends or building relationship, which we've seen is incredibly important before. And the barriers are inability to break into conversation, lack of teacher-led group diversity, a fear of anxiety about the potential negative effect that this intercultural international integration might have on assessment. Some of our students said, well, if I'm on a group with people that don't speak English very well, my assessment will be weak. I don't want to be with them. I appreciate they want to be part of it, but this will impact on me, so no thanks. So as teachers, we have a duty here. Isn't it a big duty? All the students that took part in our focus groups, but is very well understood outside of our own focus groups and in literature, students think that the learning environment is the first space in which this intercultural international integration can occur. And I believe that teachers have a big role in this, in trying to foster this sense of belonging, this sense of being in here together, the sense of make the most of each other, abilities and knowledge and culture and backgrounds. And they need to be supported in seeing the beauty of it and not the hindrance that this can be caused. Example of good practices, intercultural training, norms for respectful classroom discussion, reflection on privilege, and take a positive turn on it. What is your privilege? How can you use it? Model and demonstrate and promote inclusive interpersonal interaction, inclusive curriculum assessment opportunity, fostering a responsible learning community, creating glossary, thoughtful group formation, ensuring the students are able to reflect on course material in the light of their own background, and they can bring who they are into discussion. We can create assessment that on which students have a degree of choice, and they can bring in everything they can bring in, from their own cultural understanding to who they are, their perspective, their stories, their abilities, their caring responsibilities. We can make sure they feel part of it. Again, up to you. Do you see this? Do you think actively on how you can create integration in your environment? What do you do for fostering that? How is different in small group teaching, large group teaching, virtual, not virtual? Think about that. Once you've done that, once you've done this on your other piece of paper, you decide if you want to share, if you want to start your own discourse on this, if you have experience of that, if you want to share your practice. Once you've done this, take 10 minutes break and come back. So pause now, do this task or this reflective exercise, share if you wish, otherwise keep it on the side, and then take 10 minutes break, please. Drink a cup of coffee or a cup of tea or water, whatever you need. Eat something. I'll see you in a bit. Positive impact of emotional intelligence. Welcome back. This is almost silly, and I'm sure you're all very well aware, but very often the institution in which we live, they do not acknowledge this because they only look at academic self, not human beings. Relevance of the role of human quality and behavior. Care, kindness, compassion in all relationship within the teaching and learning. Students and staff, students, staff. We have to create care, kind, compassionate learning environment. If we are object of kindness, compassion, we work better, we feel better. Very easy, isn't it? To me, it's brainless. I'm sure for you, it's brainless. It is not within our institution. Or very often is not recognized. These are the softy things. They're not very important, are they? This is what I've been told. To me, this is the most crucial part. If we don't get this, we will not get the hard thing. We will not get the hard learning. Staff members articulate the core need to possess emotional intelligence in their interaction with students, directing care by employing soft skills such as approachability, empathy, showing a capacity for listening, communicating effectively. These qualities are often associated to good teaching practices. So this idea that I'm not the type of person, not really, yeah, we're all very different, but approachability is not about being that type of person, it's about being a good teacher. The capacity of listening is about being a good teacher. The capacity of providing feedback that is useful and graceful is part of being a good teacher. And this is also for student-student relationship. Some students described how the teacher might be very empathic, very approachable, but they felt not belonging to the classroom because of the peer behavior. And this goes back to what we were talking before, this idea of integration, this idea of making sure that people feel they belong. So it's not only about staff students, it's also making sure that students have the opportunity, the freedom, the ability to show that care and kindness and compassion. They are under enormous stress. We have to create spaces in which they feel they can. It's already in them. We don't have to do anything. It's just creating spaces in which they can express this. And we can express this. Here's an example of good practice. Reminding ourselves and others that we all play an important role in setting a positive and supportive tone, sharing teaching philosophy, introducing yourself to your class. Yes, your personal self, sharing your failings. That is what becomes very easy to me. But, whenever possible, letting students know that you care about them, their success, their hopes, their ideas, seeking feedback from students, considering alternative forms of office hours, Skype, OneNote, student hour, whatever. Up to you again. How do you sit with this? What are your examples? What are your practices? How you can make sure the students know you are approachable, that they can approach you, they can talk to you, they can share what they worry about. Take another few minutes for this. Last but not the least, the relationship between staff well-being and students well-being. Well-being for staff and students are linked in a student-staff well-being loop. So many staff said how their own well-being, which is precarious, restricts their ability to positively impact on students' well-being, as it prevents them to be able to effectively contribute to a caring, kind and compassionate learning environment. If you live in a department which doesn't have compassionate cultures, you will feel not well. You'll go in a class, you will not have the strength, the space of mind, the ability to create those environments, to foster that kindness and compassion that you want to create. So if we want to improve students' well-being, we have to think about staff well-being. Staff well-being and mental health is deteriorating across the higher education sector, for both academic and non-academic staff. And there are issues concerned to increasing pressure to perform, excessive workload, precarious contract, culture of workplace surveillance, lack of well-being support. This lack of well-being, of positive well-being support affects staff, and staff cannot function in the best possible way, and this will affect students' well-being as a consequence. We need to think of ways to create care and compassion places in our institution. Care and kindness, compassion for one another in teaching and learning environment, as well as in the one institutional context, is supportive of well-being for students and staff members alike. Lee Lewis has researched the positive consequences of compassion in the workplace, as well as the organization responsibility. Compassion shown by work colleagues can strengthen emotional connection at work and boost people's ability to function as productive employees, if you want to convince your own institution. And that whether the social coordination of compassion is activated and mobilized depends on the organization's social architecture and the agency of those in the organization. We can create caring and compassionate environment where people feel they belong, they can integrate, they are at the center, they have a face, they have a name, students and staff alike. And the creation of these environments depends on us, but depends on our institution. The institution have the duty to model this. We should push for compassion to be embedded in organizations. If you're interested in this, there are more readings in one of the worksheets later on about how to embed, how to claim, how to ask for compassion in institutions, how organization can embed compassionate environment, can create, as form as the organizational structures, these environments to be created. I leave it to you. Please think about the relationship between staff and students' well-being. Is it true for you? How do you function? How your feelings impacts on the classroom? How the way in which you're treated in your department impacts in the classroom? Share, jot down your experience, look at this loop. Done for now, almost 1 hour. You heard enough of me, so I'll leave it to the next task and ideas, and I'll stop sharing this so you can see me again. Yes, that is my contribution. Loads of references at the back of this presentation that I will upload. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you somehow soon, and thank you for this. This is just the beginning of a conversation. We can talk about this much more. I'm really interested in looking at what you produced as part of this presentation. I'm really interested to learn about from you. Thank you so much, and speak very soon.